So primarily, I am a software engineer. I've been developing software since the early 90s, back in the days of DOS and 8088 processors. I used to build computers from scratch. I mean, I was fascinated by them. I started coding database stuff like right away. As soon as I was like, what is this? I was working in sales and in the hair industry at the time. And so I started wanting to track like my sales and people I was doing business with and things like that. So I was fascinated with computers. From there, I went into basically right away went into working for Intuit. My first tech support job was doing TurboTax support. So if you had TurboTax questions back in the mid 90s, I might have helped you at one point with your printer. And then after that, I worked in the healthcare industry. I went to a healthcare startup and helped them develop a healthcare system basically that allowed doctors to connect data across multiple health plans. This was like this was, no one was really doing this at the time. This was like late 1990, right before the dot-com crash, basically. And then I helped them build that system. And then from there, I went and worked in the early 2000s. I started a paper company with my wife, which spawned into the wedding report because we needed data about invitations and where I was basically making paper from scratch with pulp and stuff. And then we needed data to figure out like how many people get married. I mean, how much do they spend on wedding invitations? And there wasn't anything out there at the time. So I went out and did my own research, started collecting data from thousands of people across the country, figuring out the whole process and how it looked. And then basically out of that spawned the wedding report in 2005. I also worked in the defense industry, helped them build a system that helps basically a program, which is a technology that to manage their cost, schedule, and risk. And actually, I'm on a patent for some of that work that I did, which is kind of cool being an inventor. But all the time working in the wedding report, working on data, collecting data, probably collected like, I don't know, to date, probably over 600,000 survey samples from people getting married, from people that work in this business, you name it. And so that's my passion is data, understanding data, how it connects together. What are the patterns? It's funny, I like to actually do data analysis for fun, which is kind of weird, but you might see me like walk by my desk and see me looking at a bunch of numbers on my monitors, and I'm just looking for patterns and trying to figure out how things correlate together, particularly around spending and how, the realities of how weddings connect back to the economy and local markets and all those things. So thus the wedding report. In 2007, I actually incorporated the wedding report, and so it's been a corporation since that time, and I'm still doing it today. So here we are. What do you want to know, Kyle?
Well, so obviously you've been running statistics, and you really drill down to almost the zip code area, not just the city. Where do you get a lot of this data from? I mean, obviously you do surveys as well, but you can't talk to.
Sure. So the process is, and this actually is the process that the census uses and that demographers use it. A demographer is someone that basically takes data, creates demographics for a market. And the way that it works is basically you collect data from survey samples, which is what the census does with their annual American Community Survey. They do a biannual business survey, but basically you're collecting samples out of a market. And from the samples, you have to have a diverse population, right? So you need, people that are different ages, you need people that are different incomes, you need people that are different genders, you need people that are different racial backgrounds, you need people that are different educations, etc., and different jobs. So you need diverse sample between like large populations and small populations. So what you do is once you collect samples, you take those data and you create models with the data that you have, and then you generate, you have to take the model data and then you take local data and you have to marry those together. So you say, oh, okay, what's a correlation between education and spending, or education and people that get married. So you have to figure out what the correlations between those are, and you have to model that out across all of the geographies we have in the US. Same thing with all the little demographic pieces. So race, education, income, occupation, and you just in age, and you model those out. And the census actually has a lot of good data that you can model out demographics from the American Community Survey. One of the questions they ask in that survey is around whether you got married in the past 12 months. And so the cool thing about that is then you can look at the demographics of people that are getting married in a very large sample base in a matter of so from 2008, which is when they started collecting that question, up until 2017, they had over almost 400,000 samples just for people that got married. And so you can then model out demographics around that and patterns, so that you can then take that and figure out your correlations between your survey data. So that's really essentially the process. And then you take demographics data and economics data from local markets, and you try to you model that back into that data so that you can figure out what the patterns are for those markets. That's essentially how all demographers do it. That's how the census does their stuff for their surveys. It's the process. That's how it works.
Okay. And so how often are you continually collecting data, or is it something that every 90 days it updates or something like that? Or is it just like every day there's new data coming in?
Well, I'm constantly collecting data every day. I don't use it until later that year because the wedding business. And a couple of years ago, I had said, oh, I'm going to do every quarter, spending updates every quarter, boom, boom, boom. And the reality is that the market doesn't really change that much for weddings, so there's no sense in really updating it every quarter. It's a lot of work to do it, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah. I'm collecting data every single day every minute of the day I'm collecting data, and then we use that later on in the year.
Okay. So the reason I asked that question is because obviously a lot of things have changed since March, as far as, are you getting data as far as cancellations versus postponements, or I don't know, what are you seeing?
Sure. So another thing, well, I just want to back up just 1 second. So one more thing that I think is important about the way that I collect data is I collect data in the process of people spending. So I try to capture them while they're in the process of planning their wedding and spending their money, not actually when they're done and it's 6 months past their wedding date.
Okay.
The reason I do that is because I think it's more consistent with what's happening in the economy today, not what happened like 12 or 18 months ago. And so I think that's super important to understanding how patterns are happening today versus, in the past. So I sent out a survey to vendors that were on my list. I have a list of like 20,000 people right now. I sent an email out to those folks. I sent an email out to brides that I already have access to fill out our survey and then I've done work with. And we got about 1,200 responses between the two sample bases. And then from that, I asked, basically, are you canceling? Are you rescheduling for later in 2020, or are you rescheduling for later in 2021? Those were the questions I asked couples that were getting married. On the vendor side, I asked them basically what percentage of their business was rescheduling, what percentage of their business was canceling, and so on. And I think, I don't know, were you on the email, Kyle?
I wasn't. I need to be.
I thought I sent it to you, but let me just hang on. Let me just look so I can give you the right stuff before I start blurting off.
And by the way, everybody else, if you have a question, either put it in chat or, like I said, just raise your hand and I'll bring you in and you can ask a question.
Basically, I said, let's see, hold on. I don't even remember. Hold on. Sorry, guys.
It's all good.
I should have this ready for you already. Uh,
While you're pulling that up, I one of the other questions I had for you is, you seem to drill down pretty tightly on areas, and it does seem to be very accurate. But when I pull up Bakersfield or 93309 or
sure.
whatever, how is it you determine that a Bakersfield area is $942 for a DJ versus Arvin or or
Yeah,
whatever?
it's all about the model and the data that came back from the market surveys.
Okay.
So, um, when you model, when you look at the economics of things and you try to model it, you're really looking for what are the correlations between these patterns and these patterns, and how can I marry those two together when you don't have enough data for this market? I mean, it would be impossible to get enough samples for every single market. I mean, honestly, I've been trying to figure out how can I get every single bride to come through. Like I was thinking,
Right.
I'll manage all the licensing for free just so I can collect the samples and get the data, but I don't think anybody will go for that. So anyway, so that's how you have to do it. You have to look at the correlations in that, and then you have to look at the patterns in those markets, and you have to marry those two together. That's how you get to it.
Have you thought about maybe reaching out to, like us, or other associations or groups in areas, and maybe have them collect the data from their members or their brides or whatever, and then feed that back to you and just kind of
Yes,
collaborate?
I used to actually collect data from people that work in the space. I'm actually looking at going back to it. The only problem is that the people getting married actually have the full picture.
Hmm.
The people working in the space typically only have a little subset of that. Also, too, if you have too many people that are in the professional side of the space, you actually miss out on the other segment of the market, which is the lower end. So I mean, when you're looking at it from an economics perspective, it's not just people that hire professionals. You have to look at the whole thing because,
Gotcha.
um, you know, otherwise you don't have a real accurate picture of the full market. I mean, I think one of the reasons that we have a lot of universities, we have a lot of people that do research or want like work in insurance and other things that use our data is because we're looking at the full spectrum of the market. We're trying to understand like what is the real economics here, not just the professional side.
Gotcha. So, like,
So
example would be, I'm going to use you, Colleen, for an example. But if she were to survey all of her brides and they all were great and they answered all the questions, it would skew the data to say that 100% of brides are booking coordinators, are
yes,
wedding planners,
yes,
you know.
exactly. Right. Or if all of your population that's responding to your survey are professional or in the professional space, higher end, and
Right.
all the people that are answering the survey are in that higher end, then it skews it towards the higher end. There's just no other way around that. So
Right.
that's why I said in the beginning, you need a diverse sample population. And so, anyways, that's the thought pattern that's happening in my mind, and why someone will look at it and go, well, that's not what I charge. Well, I understand that's not what you might charge, but that's the reality of the market in general. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
um,
So back to the data you were pulling up.
yeah, I mean, and that includes people that hire their friend. I mean, how many people have friends who are photographers, right? They said, hey,
Right.
look, I'll do your wedding. Don't worry about it. I'll do it for, a couple $100. Or,
Yeah.
all of those things have to factor in. How do you understand the real economics of it if you don't factor those in? You just can't.
Right.
Um,
Makes sense. Okay.
yeah.
So the data.
And then there's amateurs, right? So people that are just getting started. I mean, I often get the question, when I put data out, and it's usually the professional side of the business, it says, well, I don't charge that and none of my friends charge that. So this has got to be wrong. Well, I can pretty easily go and look in your market really quickly and find someone that'll do it for a lot less without much trouble at all. So,
Right.
you have to understand the entire market. That's what it is. And I realize that, um, you know, for someone that works in the professional side, for them to see that and it's not what they charge, I totally get it.
Right.
But you have to understand my side of it is I'm just trying to help you understand what the real market is, the
Right.
whole market,
You're not
not
you're not
just this side.
you're not basing the cost, and we have a couple of photographers in here. You're not basing the cost of the photographer or the average price based on the quality of their work. It could be the worst photographer in the world.
That's
He
right.
doesn't even know how to take pictures, but because he's taken pictures at weddings, he's kind of part of that average.
He is. I mean, because when you ask the couple, they're the ones getting married, right? That's why I said they have the full picture. And so there, there's lots of people that go to the courthouse and get their license and get married in the backyard. There's lots of people that have a very small wedding. There's lots of people that have huge weddings, and there's lots of people that have all kinds. I mean, there's so many spectrums of it. It's crazy, right? So, that's what I'm thinking about.
Right.
Just so you guys understand, that's where I'm coming from. It's not because I'm trying to be biased one way or the other. I'm trying to give you the real picture. What is the real thing?
Right.
I don't have anything in this to like skew one way or the other for some reason, right? I want to give you the best picture of the market I possibly can.
Right. So what are you seeing in the past with the last survey you did?
Yeah, so I found the data. So basically, the way it came out was about 26% of couples are postponing to later in 2020. Most of those were coming from the April and May timeframe, but I was also seeing some August and September folks postponing to later in 2020 for some reason or another. I don't know. People were doing it. 26.5% are moving to 2021. Those were basically like April to December. So it was all over the board when it came to like when they were doing it. I think a lot of times, like if a date's important to someone or a certain, whatever, then they're really trying to get back to that date or whatever. And then about 5.5% were canceling altogether, and most of those were coming like from April to June. And then about 42% were basically keeping the date they had. And this is, so just to put this in perspective, this might vary by market, depending on the market and how the conditions are in your market. But this was across the board US. So, as you know, like in the Southwest and probably some parts of California, April, March are really beautiful months. And so that's when a lot of people are getting married, especially I'm in Tucson. This is like March and April are the times when people get married here. And everything was done, right? Canceled. So, and then, so the way I was looking at it is I was thinking probably 27 to 32% of weddings we would have in 2020 would be pretty much kind of lost to 2021 or canceled altogether. And if you look at 2021, I was thinking, okay, well, if people are rescheduling, you're probably going to get a surge of about 20%, maybe 25% over what you would normally see, which is about 2.25 or 2.2 million people getting married every year. And so when you factor the loss and you factor in, so the loss, I was looking at about 660,000 weddings this year, which represents, just without looking at spending numbers, because I need more data around that, but that's about $16 billion in spending total. And then a surge represented about 500,000 weddings more next year. So, which represents about 12 to 13 billion dollars in total sales. So I was thinking probably the net loss is going to be between 4 and maybe $5 billion. The net loss, hopefully that's it. But honestly, I think how people spend has changed quite a bit, or how they're going to spend is going to change quite a bit. Many people were affected, not just by, like I know a lot of people have already spent some money on their weddings, so those will probably be okay, but I'm sure they're going to cut back on guests. I'm sure that, you'll see probably some much different patterns coming out of this.
Now, have you asked the question, mostly to the professionals, I guess, or actually it could be the professionals and the brides, what they might be either looking for in the future? Meaning, like we were talking before you came in, how buffets themselves will probably be a thing of the past. I think serving at a buffet line with a sneeze guard kind of thing might be coming to our future real soon. Or a venue that might accommodate 300 is now going to accommodate 200, with social distancing, or one of our previous speakers, Alan, was talking about the fact that if the bride doesn't see it, then it didn't happen. So like doing cleanings and stuff like that during the beginning of the event, or checking people's temperatures. Did you ask any questions like that? That might be okay.
No, I was really trying to get a feel for like how many weddings we were going to lose this year and or gain for next year. I was really just trying to understand that impact. The next level of stuff was really, I'm going to ask, will be probably around the economics part of it, because I need to understand what that is so I can roll that back into the forecast.
Got it.
But those are really good questions, and I think you will probably see a combination of all those things, right? There are some people that don't feel like this is much of a big deal, and that won't impact them. There's other people that feel like this is a really big deal, and they're scared, rightfully,
Right.
so they're gonna be different, right? So I think you'll see things across the board, but I think we probably have changed quite a bit. I don't think we know the economic. So I was thinking about the economics of this. Like the worst thing that could have happened was probably 9/11, when we closed down air travel for a couple of days, right? And sorted through all that stuff. And then I was trying to get some economics data around the Spanish flu part back in the 1918. Unfortunately, there's not a ton, and we weren't as spread out as we are today. I mean, there wasn't that big of a population, so
Right.
I'm not sure. And business is so different today than it was then. I'm not sure it applies as much, but I don't know. I need to understand like how much income. I mean, I've already heard things like I'm in Arizona, I'm in Tucson. Like the U of A is already cutting salaries of their staff by 20%. These are full-time employees. Boom, salary cut 20%, just so they don't get laid off. So how is that? How are other big corporations actually going to be doing this, right? Are they going to be cutting salaries just so that they can't lay people off to get through this year? How's that going to impact them later? I mean, how many people already live paycheck to paycheck, right? And don't have any savings to get them through. On the survey I did to the business folks, I asked a private question about just to get their feedback about their feelings and various other things. And I got to be honest with you, there was quite a few comments around people not being able to make it for the next month or two. And then there were some that were like, hey, we're not impacted as much right now because our weddings are later in the year, or we planned for various different things and we had reserves and stuff like that. So it's across the board, but there's gonna be a significant impact, I think.
Do you have any data on how many in our industry will not make it?
I'm going to guess to say, I don't know yet, but just from the people that were getting the most cancellations, most of the cancellations were coming from like the entertainment side, the catering and rental side. And my guess is as guest counts shrink, that's probably going to impact them significantly. The venues that have maybe rescheduled, sure, can they make it though until then, right? I don't know. I mean, I think some people are going to be, it just really depends on how well you've prepared as a business to get through these things. And if you can get funding to help you get through these times, that's another thing, right? Planning and services side are probably, so I would say that the businesses that have the least barrier to entry, which is like planning, photography, DJ, are probably going to be better. There'll probably be a couple of things happen there. One is they'll probably be less likely to lose their entire business unless they have quite a few employees and a larger business. But they'll also unfortunately get a large surge of people trying to get into that space. And so you're probably going to see a surge of competition come into the space, and it's going to put pressure on pricing and other things. People that have a high barrier to entry, like a venue, those ones will probably be, or a jewelry shop, or the ones that have a high barrier to entry, like there's a lot of cost involved to get into that business. Those will be the ones that will be impacted the most. Likely because they just don't have the business coming in. Rentals, right? It's not just weddings. Rentals do all kinds of things, all kinds of events. Well, if there's no big events going on where there's a bunch of people gathering, what the hell are they going to do?
Right.
So yeah, those guys are probably going to be impacted big time.
quite a bit. I've actually talked to our two largest rental companies here in town, and each of them have talked about losses already
Oh
in
yeah,
the several hundreds of thousands of dollars, both of them.
yeah.
And, again, they already own the equipment, thank goodness. And so it's something
But
that
think
will
about
come.
it too. It's like it's a trickle down effect on everybody that's downstream, right? So, okay, so now venues, they can't host events. Well, it trickles down to the rentals and to the catering folks. And then all the employees of those, they don't have work, right? So it trickles down into them. And now they can't pay their bills. And so now the people that they rent from or buy homes from or whatever, they're not getting their money. So it's just this, it's a big crazy mess.
Wow.
The best way I can.
Yeah. Um, so back to the data collection. When you are talking to the professionals or the brides, again,
Yeah.
can work both ways. The question would be different, but the answer might be the same. Are you finding, or do you ask the question, how are they searching for the brides? In other words, are they using MySpace or Instagram, kind of thing? Obviously not using MySpace, but are you surveying what best marketing techniques that they seem to be using that
Oh
are
yeah.
working?
So on my cost survey, I asked them those questions. Where are they finding vendors and stuff. So on the cost survey, I do that. I actually need to publish last year's. I just haven't got to it yet. But the thing I'm seeing is obviously social media is huge for couples right now. Pinterest, Instagram. Instagram is probably Pinterest and Instagram are probably the biggest ones where they're just getting inspiration and looking for vendors. That's what I see personally. But they're also using search, right? And people that they know. So people they know tells them who to go to. That's where they go, or they'll at least check it out. And if someone tells me who, I mean, how do you, if someone says to you, or if you're looking for someone, you ask some questions and they tell you, hey, go check out so and so, what's the first thing you do, right? I go Google it, right? I
Yeah.
just go online, I'm looking. And then I go through whatever, oh, okay, look, here's their website. I go check them out. Oh, they're on social media. Oh, let me go look at their social media. So I think people do the same thing, right? It's not any different than how you and I look for things when we need things, right? You need a whatever, right? You go look, you go just go search, or you ask people, hey, tell me, what do you think?
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Okay. Um, awesome. So it looks like things are going to be a little struggling,
Yeah.
for the rest of the year, probably.
Yeah.
But beyond that, things will kind of come back with some changes. It looks like.
I think you'll see some changes, but I think also too, I think you'll see some innovation out of this, right? I mean, people will figure out how to innovate and do new things to make the market better, right? As a business, you should be looking at all the stuff that you're doing and try to figure out how to streamline the things that you do, right? Look at the services that you offer. Everything you provide, is it necessary, or can you scale it down a little bit and try to, look, I really don't need to offer that. I mean, one of the things you can do is go back and talk to the people you've done business with and ask them, look, I gave you these 6 things in my package or whatever. Did you use these things? And then just get rid of the stuff no one's using. That's how you cut costs right there. And then look at opportunities to reach down into the market. So if you're a professional, like I interviewed someone a couple weeks ago. She owns the farm in Rome, Georgia. And I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically it's a big, it's kind of out in the middle. Rome, Georgia is kind of like out in the middle of the country in northwestern Georgia. And they have this huge venue. And what they usually do is they rent this thing out over the weekend. And so it's usually a weekend deal. They have like 30 rooms and the whole thing. So it's, you're talking like a $30,000-$40,000 wedding for the weekend. As we were talking, she says, well, one of the things I've done is I've actually created something called pop-up weddings, which is not really a new term. It's just, that's what she called it. And what she did is she said, look, I'm doing a 4-hour event. Everything is included for the couple, and I do it for $4,500. And so obviously depending on guest, right? But that's the base starting price, $4,500, 4-hour event. They come in, and when they're not booked, she says, I'm doing tons of these. So what is she doing? She's a professional. She's got this beautiful property. They do $30,000-$40,000 weddings every weekend for the most part. But she's looking at opportunities to reach down into the market and go, look, what else can I do to grow my business? She also owns a couple of different businesses. She owns an event service where she offers planning services. She owns a florist, flower shop. They bought a donut shop, so they're doing catering for like donuts and other stuff. So she's diversified a little bit within the space, but for the most part, she's looking at what can I do as a business to reach down. You should be looking at that too. There's an interview live now up on the site that I did of a videographer on last week actually, and his name's Charles, and he has 3 different brands. His first brand is basically where they do mostly commercial and drone footage stuff, and it's a higher end product that they offer, right? Because it's commercial and other stuff. They have a middle tier product, which is a different brand, where you're looking at $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to do business with them in that tier. And then they have this lower end tier, which is a completely different brand that they offer starting at $2,500. And he said, basically 20% of my business at the middle tier is coming in from the lower tier, because now, and I asked him, I said, look, so if you didn't have that lower tier, would you even have a conversation with these people? He said, no, probably not. So the reason the fact that he's reaching down a little bit into the market is giving him an opportunity to have conversation with them and then moving them up in tier if that's what they want. And if not, figure out a way to deliver a product that you can deliver for a more reasonable price.
So it's more of an education process for the bride and groom.
Yeah.
They come in thinking, oh, I can get a DJ for $500. And then when you talk to them, you educate them a little bit on, the process that goes into it, the number of hours that goes into the planning and the layout and the timeline and all that kind of stuff, and working with the other vendors, the photographers and the coordinators and, the venues and stuff like that. So once you educate them, they have the funds and they're willing to spend them. They just didn't know.
Yeah, but could you, the thing is could you offer a product at $500? You probably could. And here's how you could do it, right? So let's say you're a professional, you've been doing this for a long time, you've got a good brand, right? Well, what if you found DJs that were just trying to get started, and you start mentoring these guys, and you train them a little bit, and you get them in, and you create a lower tier product, and you get them doing the lower tier events. You streamline it so that they're only spending a few hours there. You're still making a little bit of money, right, on the deal. You're getting experience under your brand, but you have this lower tier product, and they're moving, then they move up. So there's opportunity for you to still make money in the space without having to say, oh, I only do this, when you can do this too.
Okay. Awesome. So does anybody have any questions for Shane? So either raise your hand or, oh, by the way, welcome, Alex. Alicio, let me bring you in.
Hello.
All right, Alicio, you're there.
Now, there we go.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just have a input on what you guys are touching on. We used to have 24 people on our staff, and I did offer the lower end photography, which we completely named it a new brand and so forth. The only problem was that everybody associated Valdefy with, we called it Snap Photography, with Snap. So they weren't paying us the top end dollar, but that's what they were expecting from the Snap Photography. So we tried it for about 6 months. It didn't quite work out because in the end, we ended up giving everybody the Valdefy product. So we had to end that as far as for us in photography.
Gotcha. That's good feedback.
They knew you were connected to Valdefy, or Snap was connected to Valdefy, so they expected the same level of brand and service and quality.
Exactly, because we were like, well, we have assistant photographers that have been trained with us. They've been working with us for over a year now. They got 30 weddings under their belt. They'll go out there, they'll do it, and they'll do it for this much. Obviously, it was under our company, but we were introducing it as an assistant photographer going out there. Well, when the assistant photographer went out there and he didn't give them everything that Valdefy package gave them, they were always like, well, we really wanted this, we really want this, and so forth. So we were back to giving them what we would have gave them at a much higher price.
Yeah, but is that really a failure of that process or a failure of educating them ahead of time and making sure they understand exactly what they're getting? You know what I mean? I'm
Oh no,
sure you put a lot of thought into it. I don't want to,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Now,
We had a whole different consultation with them, a whole different price list. Everything, we showed them exactly what they were getting, and they were all gun ho for it. But then at the end, after the wedding and so forth, they were like, "Well, can we get this? Can we get that?" And obviously, we were like, "Yeah, of course you can get anything you'd like, but it's going to cost more." And that's where we ran into the problem where at the end they wanted more.
Gotcha. Thanks, Licio.
Yeah. Thanks.
Alex, you had a question.
Well, that's a little different in the restaurant business. What I like doing, I like getting them in low as possible with entry package, and then building them up, but walking them through the whole process. We offer the we call it the popular pack. That's the cheapest one we offer, and that's the most popular. But then we make them feel good about it. Meanwhile, we're also telling them we're also walking them through the process as far as, you know what, we might not be the cheapest, but we're fully licensed, and I tell them all the pros about it, and I also let them know, you know what, there's people doing it from their house. They're going to do it really cheap. I can't compete against them, but they're not licensed, they're not insured, they're this and that. So I start walking through the process. They feel a lot more comfortable. Then they themselves start upgrading. What if we do steak instead of a chile verde? What do we do this? But I hook them at the beginning, and it's kind of like I was watching an episode of The Prophet last night, and it was one of them who was buying cars, or buying a company that sells cars, and the guy that was running the company before he bought it was doing an appraisal, and has the owner of the car sit inside the office while this guy would go do the appraisal to see if he's going to buy his car at the dealership. They buy wholesale cars. Meanwhile, the guy's inside the office biting his nails. This guy's doing the appraisal. He goes in, gives him the price, and this guy's like, "Are you crazy?" But then the profit guy, the Marcus Demones, goes, "Why don't you get him with you, walk him through the whole appraisal, show them all the problems that you saw with the car, let them see the scratches, the dings, the this and that, and then they'll start understanding. When you come in with whatever bid you come in, they'll understand. They won't be surprised. They won't be in the office just biting their nails and saying, 'This guy's gonna rob me. This guy's gonna rob me.'" Same thing with us. Go in, I walk him through. I tell them all the pros and cons, and then as soon as I grab them, I get them for the low package. Then they themselves are going to start wanting, "Hey, how about we do this? How about we do that?" If I go straight to the deluxe package, of course they're going to shoot me down.
Yeah, that's what Charles does. Yeah, that's exactly what Charles was doing. He basically gets them in on the low tier, and then he just tells them what's included, talks about everything he does, and then gives them the pros and cons of everything, and then they go, "Oh, well, what about this and what about that?" And then, well, that's included in this over here in this service. So yeah,
like in the photography, I'm assuming, I don't know, I've never been a photographer, but I don't know if you could tell them, you know what, maybe down this is not going to be included, or something like that. I don't know. It's totally different game than what I'm in.
Yeah, and the unfortunate part is, as soon as you tell them, "Well, sorry, that's not what you signed up for," then they go badmouth you online, and then
Licio, you're in.
Yeah, we did end up booking a lot more people that ended up going with the Valdefee package versus a Snap package once we explained everything to them. So we did end up upgrading a lot of people to the Valdefee package, but the few that did stay that were on a really tight budget and they went with the Snap photography, those, not everyone either, just some. And it only takes, 2 bad reviews to bring you to 4.8 stars. So,
but weren't you doing a separate name, not affiliated to your original name?
Well, because Snap Photography was assistant photographers that we had, so it was like their own company. We were sending out our assistant photographers to cover the event, and not us. So they were getting a huge price break. In the end, sometimes if we didn't have a wedding that day and we sent out Snap Photography, I would go with them, so they'd end up getting me at the end, and they were really happy about that. But I can never guarantee them myself, because if I got booked, then I wasn't going to be able to go. For the most part, everybody was happy. They either upgraded or they were very happy with them because our assistants were well trained. They had, 20, 30 weddings under their belt already. But there was a few clients that complained, and I don't like one complaint. If I get one complaint, I got to do something about it. Yeah. So after getting 3 or 4 complaints throughout, the 8-year course that we ran this, then I had to change it. I said, no, you know what? We'll offer a smaller package. It's value fee, but it'll be us with an assistant, so that's what we ended up going to.
What about separating your company altogether? 2 different companies, one a lower end and one a higher end.
Then the guy will run off and do their own thing.
True. All right, I got you.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Alex.
Is it really bad to get a couple bad reviews? I mean, the reality is that, yeah, you're not going to have, I mean, I get the 5-star deal, but, the thing is that you're not going to please everybody. And I think consumers understand that. And I think if they read something, and then if you just reply, because when you reply, you're really replying for anybody else that's reading it. If you reply in a positive, professional manner, they're not going to look at that and go like, these guys suck because they got a 4.8 now, and because they got a couple bad reviews. These guys didn't get what they wanted.
You got to be very, very careful how you reply, though. If he's telling you, if he doesn't put it very professional and say, basically, you get what you pay for. Oh, well, of course, not in those words, but
yeah.
We don't offer you the better package and you turned it down, then you'll still be the villain here.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you're not going to please everybody. You guys got to understand that. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's not
right now. I got 2 different companies. We got Lamina, of course, and now we got SoCal Tamal. I really don't want them to be mixed in any shape or form. I try to keep them very independent because Bakersfield is small. If something happens, it could, and we got lots of different companies. We got Bootleggers, we got Fresco Grill, we got Lamina, and we got SoCal. But one of the reasons, because some of them are like my sister owns some, my brother owns some. That's one of the reasons. Yeah. But last time it's just good to diversify. Open up another company under another name, because if something tragic does happen, that they shut you down for whatever bad reason, well, not everybody's gonna suffer. And if you got a really bad Facebook review, or you fight it out with somebody in Facebook on accident or what have you, then you still got and all that stuff blows over anyways. Regardless, the health department rep asked me to represent or help them pass the law about the illegal street vendors. So there I go. I mean, I had like 20, now about 30 or 40 restaurants backing me up. We had something called the Mexican Mexican Restaurant Association, Kern County Mexican Restaurant Association. And so we had about the first meeting we had, the health department, everybody showed up. Matt Constantine was even impressed. He's like, "Damn, Alex, how'd you get so many people?" I go, "Well, we're pretty passionate about it." So he asked, "Could you talk about this in front of the supervisors, because we need funding for law enforcement. We need to be able to confiscate all that stuff." So I'm like, "You know what, man? I've known you for a long time, and let's go ahead and do it." So I did it. And unfortunately, when I did do it, I went up in front of the supervisor. I told him I was from Lamina Restaurant, which I probably shouldn't have. I should have said more like the Mexican Restaurant Association. And we fought pretty good at it, and boom, they passed the law. But I got all kinds of crap on Facebook because of it. And I mean, really bad, saying, "Why you want to stop people from making a living in the streets? And you're just a hater, and your food sucks, and you're this, and you're that, and you're that." And even my dad's like, "Hey, Mijo, why would you want to do that?" I said, well, I was helping out the health department, didn't think about the consequences, but it'll blow over. And I was pretty nervous for about a week. But after about a week, half 2 weeks, then everything kind of stopped. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Alex. All right. So, do we have any other questions for Shane? All right. So Shane, tell us how people can get a hold of you, your website, stuff like that. And
sure. The website is wedding.report. You can email me at shane@wedding.report, or you can give me a call, 520-399-8580. Either one. Text me too. You can text me that number as well.
Cool. We'll include all that in the show notes. Any parting thoughts or?
Just, I would, the biggest thing I would say is try to take this time to figure out and take the things you're doing in business, try to figure out how you can streamline what it is you're doing to cut your expenses so you can reduce your cost. And then just look for ways that you can reach down into the market. That's where, a lot of the opportunity, there's tons of opportunity in the market. I'm telling you now, there's 50 plus market, there's, lower end, there's so many ways to make money in this market. You just have to be able to look at the data, take your data from your business. If you're not collecting data today, I beg you to start collecting data about your customers, who they are, where they live, what their demographics are, if you can, so that you can figure out where other people are like them. That's what you want to do. And then look at what you're making from them. Look at if you're selling different things, what are you making the most profit from? It might actually be something you didn't realize you were making the most profit from this thing. And you're trying to sell this other thing that's this big whatever, but you've been making the most profit from this smaller thing. Focus on that. Whatever you're making the most profit from, focus on that. So figure out what your profit margins are for the things that you're providing, streamline that as best you can, and try to focus on and find opportunities to reach down, reach out into different opportunities. There's so many things out there. I don't know.
There is a follow-up question to that. When you say as far as gathering the data in your business, how do you, obviously some things will become obvious when you see somebody, you'll know their gender, you'll know their approximate age range, you'll know things like that. But how do you get information that you may not, so Shane, you're my groom. How much do you make? So I need to know.
So here, yeah, right. So number one, you have their address, right? So if you have their address, then you pretty much know what zip code they live in. So if you know what zip code they live in, there's tons of demographics on zip codes. You can figure out what the average income is for that zip code, and you can just correlate that back to that person. Number two, ask them what kind of work they do. What do you do for a living, right? Right. And once you understand what they do for a living, then you can correlate the fact that, oh, this guy's a lawyer or this guy's a software engineer, and then you can correlate that back to zip code, which is where they live, right? And then back to the type of work they do, and then that back to income, so you can always connect those dots. So that's how just look for the obvious things, right? Like number of guests, which is obvious, but you know their gender, but what kind of work do you do?
Yeah.
Right. Where do you live? And then, try to look at so the where you live, the geography part is really important, I think, because, a lot of people really don't understand their geography from a perspective of their market, right? You just think, oh, there's this, whatever, I'm in this county, but how many counties are in your, obviously in the West, there's only one county in Bakersfield. So the funny thing about the West part of the US is that usually the metropolitan areas are one county or one part of a county. So try to understand zip codes, cities around you, and then try to figure out what the demographics are of those, and then figure out how far people are traveling from you.
Okay.
Do business with you. So if you live in one zip code, but most of your business is coming from, say, 20 or 30 miles out in the market, maybe you should be looking at that market as an opportunity to be marketing to more. There's so many, you can do that with Google ads, you can do that with probably Facebook ads to actually market to specific zip codes. So I don't know, those are opportunities.
Okay. And the nice
give you guys one last thought that I was thinking. I'm at a disadvantage in Lamont. Lamont is a small town, doesn't got Facebook. Well, it does, but it's not that popular because mostly Hispanics, older age Hispanics. They don't got Uber Eats, they don't got Grubhub, they don't got none of that stuff. So I'm thinking, me and my sister, me and my wife and my son were sat down thinking, all right, what can we do? So we started thinking outside the box. And it's weird times call for weird measures. So I'm thinking, all right, what are we gonna do? We started brainstorming. What I do? I got a trailer. I put a banner on it. I'm driving around Lamont. Let them know that we're open, because some people didn't even know we were open. This was right after the governor announced, what was it, March 12th or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so we had to let the people know that we were open. So that was it. I'm driving around my truck. My wife's like, "Are you really gonna drive around your truck with pulling a trailer with a couple of banners?" I said, "Baby, desperate times, just for measures. I got to do something." Right? So we did that. we did little flyers, and we put them in markets of the people that I know that own markets, gas stations, whatever. Then we started giving away rice and beans with dry rice, dry beans when they weren't too easy to get a hold of. Through Cisco, we were always getting rice and beans because Cisco always had it because they're like a disaster relief company or something like that. But they always had access to rice and beans. So a purchase of $25 or more, I give them a 2-pound bag of rice or a 2-pound bag of beans. They decided. They're like, "Are you serious?" The customer were like, "Are you serious? You're gonna give us rice? You're gonna give us?" So, and then that creates people talking and talking. Like, see, I'm a disadvantage because I don't got all that other technology in Lamont. So between those 2 or 3 things, I guess what I'm saying is everybody should sit down with their business partner or with their wife or with their family members, whoever's in the business with them, and say, "Hey, what can we do outside the box?
Yeah.
You know, whatever it takes outside the box." That's what I'm saying.
Alex, based on what you just said, one of the things you could actually do, pretty reasonably actually, is do a mailing to every door. It's called Every Door Direct Mail in Lamont, and that's looks like I'm pulling it up right now on. Well, here I'll share my screen real quick with you, so you can see it. There. So if you did a mailing to the Lamont area, you have 3,934 addresses right there. $751 is the mailing cost. So you're talking, 20 cents a name to mail a postcard to everybody. All these blue ones right here, basically.
We've done that before. So this time, how much that was? Because budgets are difficult right now too.
Yes.
So we've done that in the past. I think we paid like $500 to $700 in the past.
Right.
Now this time out of emergency, I just pinned them up, took them down. Yeah. But you're right. To hit the houses, I should probably do something like that.
You do something like that, your overall cost probably be about $1,500 between the printing and mailing and everything else, if that much, and you hit every single door. Shane,
do you get people from different parts of the area come visit your restaurants? I mean, I would imagine you do.
If we're talking about Lamont, I get people from Lamont and Auburn pretty much only, unless they're traveling, going by, unless they're there for work, like if they work at the courthouse and they live in Bakersfield, then I get some of those. But unless they're traveling through, I'm in a pretty traffic street, so that kind of helps.
What about tech companies and stuff? Because, is there any tech companies over there near you?
No.
In Lamont, Shane, you see here, this is Bakersfield over here.
Agriculture.
What's interesting about Kern County is, if I zoom out, this is Bakersfield. Yeah. This over here is Taft. This over here is Delano. None of the cities are like in Orange County, one city bleeds into the next city.
Yeah. Pretty spread out there.
Yeah, and like Lamont is here, but then you've got Weed Patch Highway, then this.
I got you.
Bakersfield for about.
Lamont's mostly field workers more than anything.
Hey, Alex, you got to hit all the people out here in Arvin on the ski lakes, because we all go to El Pueblo.
Oh,
you're missing the boat.
I know.
Hey, well, that's what I was getting at.
I don't know what to do about that. Yeah, I know
that's what I was getting at, because I know people here, like, they have food trucks and stuff that are like miles away from where I live, but I have a group of guys that I get together with, and we go hit up the food trucks that are miles away from here, right? Like, just for lunch. Yeah. Let's go.
Actually, I got a food truck. The SoCal is the part of the company that's called SoCal. That's a food truck, and it's doing phenomenal right now. I mean, but my son's running it. He got really creative. He's done a lot. That one's in town in Bakersfield.
That's on
so
District.
He was able to capitalize. Yeah, on District and Ash.
Yeah.
He was able to capitalize.
That was awesome.
Thanks, man.
There you go.
So he was
Alex,
all that crazy stuff.
Alex, hit me up. I'll get you in the lakes out here, because it's packed on weekends.
Yeah, well, you're over there on Mullix Road or something like that.
Yeah, I'm on Banana off of Tahoe.
So
yeah, okay.
There's 15 more off of Weed Patch.
Well, okay, off of Weed Patch Highway, we've done caterings over there with on Weed Patch Highway.
Hey, Shane, so I have one more, one more question. This is actually something that I actually spoke on years ago up in Tehachapi. They were actually trying to shut down a venue due to noise ordinance and stuff like that. One thing I brought in was not only the statistics of what the impact was by not having the wedding there. So the caterer wasn't working, the DJ wasn't working, and the venue wasn't working, and the limousine company and the videographer, so on and so forth. But I also brought to their attention the overall economic impact to the town. 100, that venue held about 100 people. Because it's a small town, I would dare bet 75 of the 100 traveled in, which means they stayed in a hotel. They bought gas. They went to the convenience store. They might have went to an amusement of some sort, whether it's the park or the train or whatever. So do you bring in statistics like that sometimes that also says the overall value of one wedding could be this price?
So that is the next, that is like the next thing I want to do. Because remember I was telling you, I'm really trying to understand the full economics, and that's what I provide. So understanding the full economics allows you to actually do that. So there's a little more data I need to collect. Some of it is around, and I actually started doing this a while back, but like what percentage of people travel into a wedding, right? Depending on where it is, like if it's a remote area, obviously more people travel in. So what does that look like? Well, what else do they spend? They buy hotels, they rent cars, they
airfare.
go to, airfare, they spend money. I'm talking about local, right? So local would be food, lodging, tours, things like that you could get locally. That's where they're spending money. And then, okay, well, what's the tax impact of that, right? So, okay, so you need to understand the tax impact. You need to understand the employment impact. You need to understand the fact that people are traveling in. What are they spending? I think if you can package that together, then you can really say, look, here's the economic impact of weddings in your market. And this doesn't include people that live there and get married. So people that live there and get married, there's actually a really good study from the University of Virginia. They were talking about like cohabitation and marriage. And one of the things that they were talking about is people that actually get married actually generate more wealth long term. And so when people generate more wealth long term, what does that mean for your economy locally, right? That means they're buying houses. That means they're buying cars. That means they're buying furniture and all these other things that they would do. They're having a family. They're going to school. They're paying more taxes. So what does that economic impact look like for people that live locally? Now, yes, people that cohabitate buy houses also, but generally the wealth growth or the contribution to the local economy is not as much as someone that gets married. So I would really like to be at like phase 2 of this whole wedding report thing would be like, what is the economic impact to the market by you promoting weddings? Like, and then hopefully it will help like change laws. Like one of the problems in like New Orleans, and I've been working with those guys for a really long time to help them kind of like get them stats to help them change laws there, is that there's this 3-day waiting period for you to get your license. So for some people that travel into New Orleans, they have to plan ahead at least 3 days before they're getting married to come in, get their license. They have to do a bunch of other stuff. Also, the licensing office doesn't stay open very late on Fridays. So if you're coming in Friday and you're getting married on Sunday, you're kind of screwed unless you get there on Thursday. So what is the economic impact, right? And so I'm trying to build that into the next phase so that I can help with the law stuff. I can help with the local governments to help them make sure they understand, look, this is the impact of weddings. You should be supporting your local wedding vendors. You should be supporting the people that are working in the space, right? So that, because you're generating a lot of income from this.
Right. The average guest is probably, and this is obviously a big average, but the average guest is probably worth $250, $300 in revenue.
Or more. Yeah.
Or more.
Yeah.
Like I said, they're going to go out to dinner the night before. They're going to rent a car. They're renting a hotel room. And, again,
what if they stay, right? Like if you come, like, Bakersfield is not very far from some really nice places in California. So what if they fly in and they stay for an extra week, right? What does that impact?
Exactly. So the value of a wedding, we are just the most valuable thing. I'm kidding. But there is a huge, huge economic value to weddings, not just the money that I make as a DJ or Alicio as a photographer or whatever. There's other impacts that
Well, and then it's trickle down again, right? Like you hire people to help you do stuff, right? You spend money on services for local, right?
Yeah.
All of those things get, that it has an impact. Yes.
Yeah. So, well, awesome. Again, one last chance for everybody. If you have a question, let me know. Otherwise, Shane, thank you so much for being a part of it. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for
Shane,
having
thank you
me
very
on.
much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys stay safe and healthy, and feel free to reach out anytime. I'm here.
Will do. Thanks.
Awesome.